until 5 a.m. I was the observer for precinct 29. Shout out to the ladies at precinct 29. They were awesome. I gotta say, I did not experience the same kind of hostility that a lot of people did. I was able to talk to the workers before someone told them they weren't allowed to talk to me, and I wasn't allowed to talk to them. A lot of them, this was their first time ever doing this. There was one lady that was there for 30 years. She's been doing it. So I observed a spoiled ballot that came to the table that should have been stopped at the clerk's office. It was put in the problem bin correctly by the supervisor, but that should have never came. The next is they weren't following procedures. So the procedure was that the first person scanned the ballot, it would go to the next person would take out the ballot, read off the ballot number, and confirm that with the first person that scanned it in, and they were not doing that. I asked them why they weren't doing that, and they said they weren't doing that this year. So that's what they told me. I watched ballots that were had the wrong number, that didn't match, the inside ballot did not match the outside of the envelope number. So the second person was verifying it with herself. She wasn't verifying it with the first person. So she noticed that, she said that to the supervisor, that they didn't match. So what they would do is they took white Post-it tape, they put it on the outside of the envelope, and they wrote down the number of the inside ballot number on the outside of the envelope. I witnessed that at least 3 times. And once the girl realized what the process was, she stopped mentioning it. She just knew what to do. Then there was, I did notice the Democrats that came in. They came in 2 different groups throughout the evening. There was 2 groups, and they weren't there to watch the process. They were there to watch us. They were standing behind me. I was 6 feet away from the table. They were behind me. They weren't watching what was going on. And at one point, I had 2 girls with their phones up, like they were recording me. I offered them my notes. I said, this is what I've observed. This is what they're doing. They're doing everything, you know, they're catching these things. There were also, I observed torn, stained, any ballots that needed to be duplicated. They were not duplicated. The supervisor asked her supervisor, which is the people with the embroidered shirts, she asked them what they should do. And that supervisor told her to run them through the tabulator and only duplicate them if it was rejected. So anything that had a smudge, a stain, a tear, and I did witness a few of them. At some point, they stopped telling the supervisor that there was an issue with a ballot because they knew they were going to run it through anyway. Didn't matter.
Thank you. So earlier in your testimony, you mentioned running the ballots through the machine and then tearing the numbers off. Were they tabulating them first and then removing the number?
No. So the first person would scan it into the e-poll book. And then he would give it to the second person. The second person was supposed to take out the ballot because the first person never saw the ballot.
Right. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. That's when you said scanned the ballot in. I assumed you were talking about putting it in the tabulator. I understand now what you're referencing. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other questions from members? Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, I have Kurt Hausauer, followed by Timothy Parker, and followed by Bill Schmidt. Is Kurt here? Kurt? Is Timothy here? Timothy Parker? Timothy Parker? And I'm putting these back into the pile, so I mean, if they miss their time now, they'll get another chance. Bill Schmidt. Is Bill Schmidt here? Robin Bozinski. It's a pretty similar name to a lot of the ones we have in the UP. So, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I do first of all want to say that we live in a republic with a democracy. I already gave you my written testimony as
yes.
well as my affidavit.
Yes.
What I'm going to tell you just a couple things that are in my sworn statement is I was a challenger down at TCF. And I did experience a lot of things of what people are saying. There was intimidation. There was the cock blocking of us being able to see the actual process where they wanted us to stand at the corner monitor. And the one most egregious thing that I noticed was it alerted me that the table person who was in charge of our table had told seat number 5 to hang on to 9 ballots because they needed to bring them back to change some numbers on them. So I'm like, oh, wait, red flag in my head. So I thought, well, I need to go over by the scanner and see what they're doing over there. And I did. And after a little bit, and I was harassed about my mask because I could only wear it up to my nose because I need to be able to breathe. And I had ADA. And anyway, so what I had witnessed was this gentleman scanning the envelope. He raised it up, calling for the table person in charge of our table to come. And he says, what am I supposed to do with this when the ballot number does not match in the book? And he said, well, we're just going to change it. And I said, you cannot change that. You cannot go in the poll book and change it. We need to challenge this. Well, when I did that, summing everything up, I was pulled aside about my mask. The woman and I had agreed that if you get me a shield, I will wear a shield with my mask. I'm good, you know. And I thought that was settled. And while she was talking to me, I could hear the gentleman tell the scanner guy, just scan them and run them through. It's not our job to double check the numbers like this.
1 minute.
So that was the most egregious thing that I had experienced. You'll see the rest of my thing. But days later, my neighbor was walking her dogs. And so I went over in my jammies and I was talking to her. And she says, Robin, I want to tell you something. You're political and I think I need to tell you something. So what she had told me was she works at the local nursing home. And she had gone back to work after being off all summer. And one of the RNs had told her that the activities director held a activity in the building with the seniors. And it was a mock election. It was a mock election with real ballots, and that they were the staff workers were helping the seniors fill these ballots out, to the point that one gentleman was writing his name as Quincy, but that wasn't his name because he had Alzheimer's. So the worker actually crossed his name out and wrote on his thing and was told that the ballots were in fact mailed out. So that's a point that I think nobody knows about or has heard about. I've asked them to come and testify, but they said that they're worried about their jobs.
And we'll need, if that issue is going to be looked into, we'll need something, your testimony would constitute hearsay.
I actually have my stuff in writing, and I've given you all and I've given the facility's name, address, and all that information to you.
Thank you. Any other members have questions?
I do want to remind you, though, that your job is to thoroughly, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we have an ethical, moral, civic duty to make sure that this election is truly an legal process. And to me, it seems like a lot of infringements and a lot of infractions, a lot of illegal behavior towards people trying to do their legal jobs were in fact violated.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. I need to apologize for Senator Tice, who had to step out for another committee, and we'll come back as soon as she can. And
so one thing I do want to tell you about.
Senator Santana does too, so thank you. We'll keep rolling.
What I want to tell you about is one of the envelopes that came through was the tab was tacked behind the envelope like this, and the ballot was showing like this, and I said, you can't process that. That is not a legal sealed envelope, and I got fought about that.
Were you successful or unsuccessful in challenging that?
Every time I challenged them, which was about 6 times, at seat number one's thing, they just wanted to put a Post-it on it and we'll look back at it later. It's not our job to worry about that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. And then the gentleman was opening the envelopes, he hit the ballot. Now remember, we do not know if these are Democratic or Republican votes. We just know that we're looking at an envelope that is legal or legally sealed or not sealed. And whenever I tried to challenge it, he put a Post-it on it, orange one.
Okay, thank you.
So, just to tell you. Thank you for having me.
Next, we have a card for Bill Schmidt, followed by Matthew Shepard, followed by Maria Menzel-Brown. Mr. Schmidt, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, sir.
Thank you, Senator Broom.
You have
All
3
the senators.
minutes.
My name's Bill Schmidt. I'm a registered voter here in the state, and I was at the TCF Center. There was a lot of confusion. You've heard a lot of testimony about the confusion. And I have to say probably a good part of that confusion is really at your doorstep. And by that being leading up to this election, we knew that there were going to be problems. And Ruth Johnson begged you guys to give the county clerks, city clerks, more time. You didn't. That's a huge chunk of this. Because anytime when there is confusion, there's always doubt. And that's what we're facing now. Likewise, there was a lot of ignorance in the room. Ignorance as to what constitutes a legitimate ballot. What is a signature supposed to be all about? How the entire process goes by. If you're predisposed to see fraud, you will see fraud in just simple mistakes. Mary Smith and Fred Jackson live at the same address. They fill out their ballots. They put them in separate envelopes, the incorrect envelopes. So you have the mismatched ballot with the number, and all this is readily explainable. Unless you want to see fraud, then these are illegal ballots. So part of this problem is just human error. Part of the problem is the folks just didn't have enough time. Part of the problem is a scourge pandemic. From
1 minute.
From my point of view, I saw a lot of poll workers work really hard. And I think there were some hard feelings on part of many of the challengers. There was a lot of sharp elbows, and people's got their feelings hurt. And I think that's what we're seeing here today. Hurt feelings. That's it.
Thank you, sir. You were in the room, I believe, a little while ago when we had a gentleman testify about how he was a poll worker and had received training, and in that training there was some instructions on making it difficult for poll challengers. Were you in the room for that part of the testimony?
I was over in the...
in another room?
Yeah.
Could you hear it? Or?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so in his testimony, he said, there was these instructions during the training, there was a lawsuit, there was instructions to the Secretary of State to not do those things, and yet that message didn't seem to be delivered. Would you agree with that as being part of the confusion?
I would say that again gets back to the fact that this was a rush process. Mm-hmm. Right. Which again gets back to how much time did you guys allow the clerks to do their job?
Okay.
right? So, I mean, there's always there's a reason for a problem.
So were you a poll challenger, a watcher, a worker? I don't remember, I'm sorry.
I'm a lifelong Republican
Okay,
until this election.
okay. But did you have I just wondered if you had a title. You said you were at TCF.
I was an election challenger, yeah.
A challenger, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, what I saw it was disturbing. I could see how people could be, you go in a very large room. It's really hot. I had a little thermometer with me to check my temperature through the course of the day. It was 85 degrees in there. It was really warm. There were too many people. People are shouting. People are yelling. There's the sharp elbows thing. You got folks that are upset with just having to be there. And because they're untrained, and there's that ignorance factor, right? Ignorance isn't the same as stupidity. It's just not knowing something. There's many things that you're ignorant about. Probably heart surgery, right? How to fix a carburetor. Brake lining, right? There's 1,000 and million things that we're just simply ignorant about. And there was a large Facebook and other social media, come on down, we need you. So you got a lot of people who are just completely untrained, had never done it before, and they're told, look out for fraud. At every single rally the president had, he said this election was going to be filled with fraud. Tweets galore, same thing. This election is a fraud.
So were you working during the shift when the ballots came in late in the morning?
I arrived at 5:55 on the 4th, the day after the election.
5:55 in the morning.
And then I left at 10 o'clock at night.
Okay.
It was that Wednesday.
So according to past testimony, that was the time of the most tension, is when you were there then?
I was there all day. I was there for 16 hours. I was working another poll site on election day.
Okay.
So my day election day was busy. And then, so.
Senator McDonald, did you have a question? No? Senator Irwin? No? Thank you very much for your testimony, sir.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this.
Next, I have Matthew Shepard, followed by Maria Menzel-Brown, and then Polly McNichol. Mr. Shepard?
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee.
Good afternoon, evening.
Not yet.
A constituent of yours from Schoolcraft County ran for county sheriff up there, and he witnessed some issues of concern regarding a county clerk not allowing individuals to question polling and what have you. That testimony has been submitted to your clerk. I also submitted my testimony of my area, and I'll read it out just real quick. Election integrity is the utmost importance to preserving our freedom through what was written by our nation's framers in the Foundation of Liberty through one of the greatest documents ever written, the U.S. Constitution. On Monday, November 23rd, 2020, I attended a Stop the Steal U.S. rally in Lansing, Michigan. Liberals expect us to respect the vote, as one of their signs said, as certified by corrupt government officials. 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the board of canvassers, 3-0 certified with 1 abstention, declaring Biden successful in this election. They should respect the truth. The truth is Biden and his co-conspirators, i.e. Michigan's executive branch, corrupt politicians, Governor Whitmer, Attorney General Nessel, and Secretary of State Benson, definitely stole this election in 2020, and most likely in 2018 with Dominion ballot machines. I would also speculate the Democrats did the same in 2008 and 2012 for Obama's reign of destruction in America. Biden's supporters also had signs made up, quote, "Follow the law," and I responded to them, "Follow the Constitution. not unconstitutional mandates made by executive orders from a tyrannical governors throughout this nation. Another sign said, BOC, do your job, which I responded, yes, the Board of Canvassers should do their job and verify the votes, not just certify the votes blindly.
One minute.
With all these signs, I imitated Speaker of the House Pelosi tearing up the Trump sign, or State of the Union address, by tearing up their ignorant signs. I found it rather peculiar whenever I visit another neighboring communities, absentee ballots for those who voting in person, for those who feared voting in person with all the fear-mongering in this nation, along with all of our active duty military personnel absentee ballots being handled behind closed doors by election polling workers. When I inquired as to why, I was told that was the way they decided to do things. Sadly, the GOP is allowed to pass 2 elections to be stolen, and top Michigan legislature leaders, Speaker of the House Lee Chatfield, Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, continue to pander to the tyrannical governance. Respectfully, Matthew Shepard, co-chair of Constitution Party, Midwest Region, and second vice chair for State Taxpayers Party of Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, were you, and forgive me if you mentioned this at the beginning, were you at TCF on Election Day?
Not
or just after?
TCF, just my local areas.
You were a poll watcher or worker at another?
I wasn't a poll watcher. I was just constitutional advising.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Parker, who I called earlier, has come. So if Mr. Parker, are you? Please come ahead. I know it's logistically complicated with multiple rooms and social distancing, so I'll try to make some allowances.
Yeah, and they said they were going to come get us when
Yeah,
I was going to be called, so we got over here.
Well, and we had a bunch of people who didn't show up, and then I had to read names faster, and so there was a little confusion there. So thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I did, my son did get the call in the morning. He called me about a minute after I got out of bed. He said, Dad, they need poll watchers, challengers down at Coble Hall. He said, can you give me any information? So I made some frantic calls, and he went down. I had wanted to go down previous. My wife, you see some of the physical conditions I have, said, no way you're going down there. But I came upstairs, said, hon, I gotta go. And so I went, and we got trained down there underneath the Election Integrity Fund. And the way I understood, there were at least 135 table groups, and I'm not sure how many Election Integrity Fund people were in there, but I knew my son was in there and had to leave to go pick up his sons. And I did not believe that they were granting other Republicans to replace them. We did know that they were kicking some out, and so I knew they were short, and yet they came out and said, no, they had plenty, and they would not let us in. I was there when they were boarding up the windows. And I don't know that Charlie the Duff, he showed up and interviewed somebody, and then they started letting in about 6 at a time. I never did make it in before I was too tired. I can't stand very long, so I very often had to sit down. But it should be amazing to us that only Republican and nonpartisan workers were denied access to legally observe what is supposed to be a fair and transparent election. And it should not even be questioned when a Republican watcher or challenger is not at each table group. In the name of honesty and integrity, every Democrat involved should demand that the process stop when without Republican eyes. This lack and the cheering and the denial should be regarded as reprehensible and manifestation of fraud with no other proof required. I mean, I've heard several times today, do you have proof? It's like, man, when you're denied access, that should be sufficient proof.
1 minute.
And as legislatures, I would just encourage you guys, the least you can do is pass legislation to require maybe a revote. I heard the one gentleman not too long ago talk about the different counties. To me, what would be a few more weeks if we actually made people feel like we had a transparent and fair election? Because right now, I would agree, most people that I know do not believe at all that we're anywhere close to that. And I would just, for the sake of the republic, I'm 67 years old, and I cannot stand the idea that our country could go down under an unfair election.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any members have questions? Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Next, I have Maria Menzel-Brown, followed by Polly McNichol, followed by Marion Sheridan. Is Maria here?